Well, it's a tremendous blessing to be able to be here. First time I came here was during the Time to Revive, and I just want to thank you, Pastor, for your heart for people, your heart for the community, your heart for the world. I've talked to hundreds of pastors about the topic I'm going to share with you here tonight, and literally many men, many individuals are like, I really can't talk about this right now. It's too difficult. But knowing what I know now, if the church doesn't do something, then who will? I'm here to share with you just briefly. We're just going to scratch the surface on this particular topic. It's horrible to talk about, but it's powerful. And about 10 years ago, my wife and I, we started our little journey. My wife got involved and started finding out about human trafficking organizations, and I was pastoring at the time, and so I said, that's your thing, and I'll support you, and I'll pray for you, and all of these sorts of things. And as I started going with her to different outreaches and things like that, and I heard more information, the Lord gripped my heart to the point to where I knew that one day we were going to be selling everything and moving to Asia, and that's where we are now. We're just a few weeks away, depending upon the COVID travel restrictions, of moving to Asia, which is an epicenter of human trafficking on the planet right now. As I said, some of the things are very difficult to hear. As a matter of fact, I remember a pastor, I was sitting across from him at breakfast time, and I began to tell him about a rescue of a little girl. And she's in a slide here, 4-year-old little girl, and he put his hands over his ears and he's like, "Don't even talk to me about it. I can't deal with it." And so I challenge you, as a brother in the Lord, this is something that is near and dear to the heart of God. The Bible says in James chapter 1, "Pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this, to care for the orphans and the widows in their suffering." Now, do you suppose kids who are being trafficked right now are suffering? Yes. Right now, there are literally millions of children locked in what would be for us a closet with a bed, with one obligation and responsibility is to tend to the men that come in and abuse them and defile them on a day by day, week by week, month by month basis. And I believe that this topic is something that should be on the news every single night about what's going on, but you hardly ever hear anything about this. Human trafficking is the illegal trade of humans against their will for the purpose of sexual exploitation, organ harvesting, or forced labor. This is modern slavery. There are more slaves today on the planet than there ever have been in the history of mankind combined. This is happening all around us. What we tend to think about regarding trafficking in the United States and prostitution and things like that is, for the most part, all false. Most of the individuals that are involved in it that's going on right here in South Bend are there because of fear, threats of intimidation, coercion, force, all kinds of things. I worked with the Child Protective Services, and just a few miles from here, we busted a group of individuals who had like 30 kids. That were being trafficked on a weekly basis, and in some instances, parents selling their own kids to these abusers just so that they can fund and support their own drug traffic. So again, this is happening all around us, and because of what I'm giving you here today, it's just, as I said, scratching the surface, and so you have to become more aware, more alert. And it may or may not be that God will use you specifically, but God will use your prayer. How many of you believe that God answers prayer? I know that this is a church that believes in prayer and the power of prayer. And this is something that when you get gripped by this, you have to pray and you have to allow it to grip your heart, as difficult as it is. Sex traffickers, child traffickers are using technology right now through social media, through so many different ways, through online gaming. I know people that are big time people in politics and things like that, where their own kids, online gamers, are being targeted by traffickers. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you have to become aware, because these people pose like they're just another little 14-year-old kid, when in all actuality, they're a trafficker and they're trying to groom and trying to influence kids. Most of the kids that get pulled into trafficking here in the United States aren't through abductions. That's kind of a stereotypical thing that you think about. The majority are through grooming, through becoming a friend to this kid, paying this kid, and doing various things to get these kids to join in. Thousands of kids are being trafficked into the United States every year, primarily through the southern borders. With the open border, then some guy can buy a kid in South America somewhere, Central America, for $50 or for free, and then bring them across the border and sell them for $50,000 to traffickers. And this is happening all the time. And so that's one of the reasons why having a secure border, I don't want this to be political, but just having those checkpoints to where trained agents can check and see if these kids belong with these people, because there are horrible, evil people who are bringing thousands and thousands of kids into the United States to abuse them. So again, don't make it political, make it about the kids. Human trafficking in the United States of America represents 2 to 3% of human trafficking worldwide. Now, you would think it's a lot more, but it's not. The United States is the greatest consumer of what's called, I hate to even say this, child rape porn. Right now, you can go onto the black web and you can watch a man abuse a 5-year-old little kid live. And this is happening, and this is being consumed at great amounts here in the United States of America. And so that's part of this whole evil process. In the United States of America, as the pastor mentioned, and as you know, being born in America with all of its flaws, with all of its warts and problems, America is based in Judeo-Christian values. That means right now we're spending billions and billions of dollars trying to stop child trafficking, trying to stop this on every level, from the community level all the way up to the federal level. There are people right now trying to stop this. And so if you and me, if I go to a school and I see a kid and I think this kid is being trafficked, I can call 911. They'll send somebody like what I used to do, and they'll go and investigate to find out if this kid is indeed being trafficked or being abused at all. Whereas the rest of the planet, my friend, there's not a 911 to call. And that's the place where Destiny Rescue is going. Destiny Rescue works to make people aware, to inform, so that you know how to act and how to live here in the United States, how to pray, and how, as God leads, how to give in order to make a difference. So in America, if you see something, you can say something and you can call 911. And so if 3% is happening in America, what does that mean? That means 97% of all trafficking is happening outside of the United States of America. Trafficking is happening. You could go to the mall today, you might go to a restaurant, you might go to a place in school, and the person right next to you might be being trafficked and you don't know. There's no simple little 10, people ask me all the time, well, what are some of the indicators? Well, you got to be more aware. It's not just 4 things and then you're looking for everybody like that. There's all different kinds of things. Many of the traffickers treat these people like property. Okay, they treat them like property, and everybody here in this room treats your own property differently, right? Somebody, you can go out to their car and it's pristine, it's clean, there's not candy wrappers on the floor mats. They make sure that your feet are clean before you get in. There might be somebody like that in here. Is there anybody? And then you go to somebody else and it's full of stuff. And you're like, is there even a place for me to sit? You know, so everybody treats their stuff differently, and so too in trafficking. People treat these people very differently. Now stop just for a minute. This is where you have to put yourself into the place of the family who has lost a child. How I got pulled into this in an intense way. My wife and I, we were at an event, and the founder of Destiny Rescue was there speaking. And as he was talking, he shared a story, a simple story of how he and his family, who are from Australia, he's got 3 daughters and a wife, and he's walking down the street in Thailand. And as he's walking down the street, a lady walks up to him and says, "Hey, would you like to buy this 10-year-old little girl?" Well, his mind is just blown. He's like, how is this even possible? Who sells kids just wide open like this? And so as he began to do research, he began to find out that sure enough, Thailand is a huge center on the planet for child trafficking. And it was at that point the Holy Spirit spoke to him and said, what would you do if that lady was trying to sell one of your daughters? And so I was sitting in the room, and I'm sitting back there, and it was just like thump. You know, it was like a harpoon hit me in the chest, because our daughter was 12 years old at the time, and I was like just beside myself. I was like, I would tear through that wall. I don't know what I would do to get my own daughter back. And then the next step, the Holy Spirit said to him, most of these kids have no one who will speak for them, and I want you to be a voice for the voiceless. I want you to stand up for those who have nobody who will represent them. And it's so true. It's so true. And so that's how Destiny Rescue got started, and that's one of the steps that the Lord used to compel me and my wife to get involved, because thinking about how would I go to sleep tonight if I knew that my daughter, my granddaughter, today we got to spend time with our granddaughter, and she's the most beautiful, precious little thing. Does anybody here have grandkids yet? That's awesome. Grandkids are amazing, right? And just being able to be around them and just loving on them and stuff. And one of the most difficult things for us is going to be to leave this little precious little girl here and fly off to Asia to rescue kids that we've never met, don't know any of these families, don't know anything about these people. And my wife challenged me on that, because she was like, well, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to help put these kids back with their parents, back with their grandparents, to be able to hug their kids once again. Destiny Rescue is one of the few organizations on the planet that actually goes to places to find the kids. Most organizations that deal with human trafficking might have homes, might do various things when the law enforcement finds a kid, and they bring them to these individuals to minister to them. Destiny Rescue, what we do is we send rescue agents into these dark places pretending to be bad guys undercover. We do all kinds of reconnaissance and those sorts of things, trying to find children. Human trafficking is the fastest growing illegal enterprise in the world, bringing in over $90 billion. It affects every country in the world. 93% is happening in the developing world. Parts of Asia are so poor that you can't even comprehend here in America. The poorest of the poor in America are rich in these places. Reasons for human trafficking are forced labor, forced marriage, sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, and organ harvesting. That's where they'll abuse kids and people to such a degree, to the point to where they become expendable. Take these people, lay them on an operating table, take their organs out, killing them and selling their organs on the black market. And yes, this is as horrible as you can think, but this is happening for money in evil. Sex trafficking, 99% of the trafficking victims in the world are women. So yes, there are boys and men it's happening to, but the primary grouping is women. 73% are in Asia. Right now, during this service, there'll be 120 new kids brought into human trafficking. Every hour, 120 new kids are brought in for various reasons, tricked, manipulated, lied to, forced, coerced. All of this is happening in different parts of the world. The arrow is there. That's where my wife and I are going. We're actually looking at a number of countries to go to, but we can't tell you because they're undisclosed countries. And in these places, there's not a lot of Christians. There's probably 2% Christians in many of these countries, and they persecute Christians, and they don't really want us there. But this is the highest level of trafficking on the planet. The places that tend to oppose the gospel of Jesus Christ, the places that tend to oppose Christianity, like right now, think about this. How many churches did you drive by tonight to get to this church? My wife and I, we drove 2 hours, so we drove by hundreds probably, right? And most people will drive by 5, 10, 15, 20 to get to their church of their choice. And that's one of the blessings and benefits of being in America. But where that red spot is, there you might have one church, small church of 20-some people for millions of people. And so it's a huge, huge difference. But that's where the Lord is sending us. So what does Destiny Rescue do? Here's a video clip I'd like for you to watch.
Here we are in Pattaya. This is one of the most renowned red light districts in Thailand. People come from all over the world to have sex with the locals. Many times that involves children. Our rescue agents go into places like Pattaya and many other areas in Thailand, and we find these young kids and we get them out. So many times I've been sitting there and I'll see these Westerners sitting with these kids, touching them so poorly, inappropriately, then taking them away and having sex. When I go into these places and I sit down and I see these kids, so many times it's brought me to tears. I mean, I'm a dad, I've got daughters of my own, and I can just imagine how I would feel, how I'd react if one of my girls were trapped in the sex trade. There is nothing that I wouldn't do to get them out. But these kids are stuck here. They're often forced into this industry by their parents, sometimes tricked, sometimes sold, and there is nobody standing up for them. And as a dad and as a human being, I want to do something about it. I want to challenge you guys that as you see pictures of these kids, let it move your heart. But don't just be moved emotionally. I challenge you, let it move you to do something about it. Let's do something about it and fight for these kids, stand up for these kids. Because if you don't, if I don't, no one's going to do it.
Destiny Rescue sends rescue agents in many of the places. Part of my responsibility as we get to whatever country we work in there in Asia is we're going to be helping to set up projects from the ground level. So that means we're going to have to hire locals. We have to vet them, train them, prepare them, and then we'll go to these various places, seek out and search out kids that are being trafficked. And so the primary target audience that we're reaching out to are 18 and under, but we rescue multiple other kinds of people in various other trafficking situations. These people right here, they'll go in, and we have multiple agents that will travel through different countries doing the research, getting kids out, and then they'll move to another section, another area. The last time my wife and I, we went to Cambodia, we smuggled in bulletproof vests. that tells you a little bit about what you have to go through to prepare to do rescues in these areas. I told you about this 4-year-old little girl. Basically, what these guys will walk into, they'll walk into a place and say, you know what, we'd like to find or set with the youngest child you might have. And so this man and woman there on the left, they brought out this 4-year-old little girl, and we were able to get her out the next day. This is another couple kids, 2 sisters, 5 and 6 years old, that were rescued in the early part of this year. And because of COVID, it's really shut down a lot of the rescue efforts, but on a regular basis, if you followed us on Facebook or social media, you'll find that on a weekly basis, there are 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 kids, depending upon what country and what situation, where people are being rescued. And so that's where we need prayer, because the rescue agents have to have wisdom and insight and strategy to know where to go, where to look, how to do this, what kind of plan, because it's not like what you see on TV where everybody walks in guns blazing and starts, getting kids out. There's so many complex levels to getting kids out of these situations. This represents 4 people kids being rescued at the border of Nepal. And so right now we have rescue agents that work with the border security, and they'll walk up to vehicles, and you can tell specifically, it's like, these kids don't belong with these adults. Let's take them, separate them, and speak to the kids. And so it takes a while to build the trust with these children and find out, sure enough, these kids weren't, related to this person. They shouldn't be in the car, and we're able to restore the kids back to their family. In all of the rescues that we do, there are 2 different basic kinds. There's one we do in conjunction with law enforcement, and then there's another that we do, which is just a kind of a 2 rescue agents trying to build the trust of these kids. And now every one of these kids has been lied to, manipulated. They don't even trust their own parents anymore. And so you can't just walk in and say, hey, come with me, I'm gonna help you get set free. And so you have to build this trust, you have to build this relationship, and show them that there is actual hope outside of where they're at and where they're being abused. Whoops. I wanna go back. Show that, there you go. This is a story about a rescue.
I remember one night I got a phone call from one of the boys. He was in a brothel. He was really desperate. He said he had a 13-year-old girl, and there was heaps of guys that were trying to take this kid off him, and he was scared he was going to get violent. So one of the boys and I jumped on our bikes and we headed straight over there, and it was quite a small, grubby little bar, about 4 or 5 tables. All of them were filled with guys drinking beer and basically staring at the young girls that were handing out the drinks. And I went over and sat down at the table with the boys, and as I did, I noticed in the back corner there looked like a stairwell going down underneath the floor. So I snuck over there and went down those stairs to see what was down there, and as I got down there I could see they'd dug out underneath the brothel and built roughly about 7 small rooms, and it was just like a thick smell of stale sweat. It was really quite disgusting. And I walked around the corner, and as soon as I got around there I could see straight away these pair of small red shoes that some kid had obviously kicked off as she was taken into the room. And as I stood there feeling really helpless, I could hear what was going on in that room, and I remember standing there realising what that 13-year-old kid that we had up at the table upstairs, what she would have to do every single night. And I knew if we didn't do something tonight, she would end up down here at some point doing what that girl was doing right then. So I went back upstairs and sat down next to that kid, and as I did that, the agent leant over to me and he said, this girl's been here for about a week, and every night, usually 4 or 5 times, she gets taken downstairs, and she's forced to have sex with customers and basically raped by these violent men. And I looked over at this kid and she was looking at me and her eyes she was petrified, and it was like she was begging me to do something to get her out of that place. So I called the mama-san, the brothel owner, over, and I said I wanted to take this kid back to my hotel room, and we negotiated a price to do that. In the brothel owner's mind, I was taking her away to have sex, but what was really happening is we were taking her away to her freedom. And we just stood up and this kid took my hand and we walked out that brothel. She jumped on the back of my bike and we took off to one of our rescue homes. And as we arrived, I looked back and I just saw this gorgeous smile on this kid's face as she realised that what we were saying was true. And she went to bed, and I think she slept for 1 or 2 days, which is quite normal. And something these kids often say is, that's the first time I can remember in a long time that I've been able to go to bed and just sleep. And my dream is that all children will be able to go to bed and sleep and not work. I have a photo on my mobile phone of those little red shoes as a constant reminder that there's still one more out there. One more kid worth rescuing, never to stop. Every kid is worth the risk, worth the love, worth the cost.
I've seen that video many times and it just brings me to tears. Because when you realize the heart of this little kid in this situation, and they don't want to be there, but they're being so broken down and abused, they need somebody who will come and help them. And that's part of what my wife and I are seeking to invest our lives in. And getting kids out of these horrible, horrible situations. Destiny Rescue doesn't just get kids out of this situation. That's not the end of the rescue. The restoration involves aftercare, safe accommodations, health services, daily needs being met, mentoring caseworkers. We help them find training and education opportunities. And where possible, we try to get these kids connected to churches, get them connected to other Christians. Many times out in outer-lying places and villages, this family might get saved, and so then they become basically a church plant in their little village, bringing Christ to them. We help kids get all different kinds of jobs that are suitable for where they're at and what they're doing in that, maybe in that specific nation, in that city where they're established. There's tons, as I said, tons of kids that are being abused. But what we're doing for one makes a difference. A number of weeks ago over here in Mishawaka, we were having a garage sale and selling all of our stuff there, and a guy from down the street had come up, and I know he's got 4 kids, and he's starting to ask me all these questions about human trafficking, what we were going to be doing, and that sort of thing. And he's just like, man, it's just so overwhelming. It doesn't seem like it's even helping. You get one kid out and then boom, another kid goes in. And I stopped him and I was like, hey man, if one of your kids got abducted, wouldn't you want me to go help rescue that kid? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you got a point. And so for every kid, it makes a difference. And part of what Destiny Rescue, the name is reestablishing this kid with a fresh destiny, because you know that the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and destroy. And he wants to steal every kid's destiny, much more so the kids that are trapped in these horrible situations. So to get them out gives them a fresh hope, a fresh lease on life. You can follow Destiny Rescue on Facebook. on Instagram. Last year, there were 1,426 kids. Since Destiny Rescue got started, there's been over 5,000 kids rescued. You can go online to Destiny Rescue and find information about things that you can do that can help educate you and train you and prepare you. But your compassionate involvement will make a difference so that these kids, their cries, because right now, nobody can hear them crying. And frankly, I hate to say it like this, but most Christians in the United States do not care. They're more concerned about what their basketball team's going to do, what their football team's going to do, what's going to happen over here and over here, than they are about the fact that little kids are being abused every single day. Every single day. And we have a responsibility as Christians to make a difference. I want to be a part of a generation that ends human trafficking. So the last thing I have is out there on the table, we got these little cards, and I just encourage you, you don't have to give a penny, but I ask you to put that little card with your Bible and pray for us. Because where we're going, there's not a ton of Christians. I'm telling you, there's hardly none. And Satan is going to try to stop us. He's coming against us. He's going to try to keep us from helping kids. But we know that as people pray and as people stand with us in this way, we will be able to seek out and see little kids brought into the arms of Jesus Christ. So with that, I want to open up just briefly for any questions you might have. I can answer them as best as possible from here. So if you're here and you got a question, raise your hand, stand up maybe, and you can ask. How many agents do we have? No, we don't have enough. Let me just say this. 95% of all the kids that are abducted and are being trafficked right now are going to be left out there, and nobody's going to get them. One, because of the lack of resources, and two, there's not enough people. Destiny Rescue, it depends upon the time and the season. We have multiple rescue agents in different places, and our goal is to raise up nationals. So wherever we go in Asia, our goal is to raise up as many nationals who will be rescue agents, mentors, counselors, people that oversee our restoration homes and that sort of thing. And so we want to work our way out of jobs so that the church in these countries are mobilized. And right now we're working in about 10 countries, and we have our eyes on multiple other countries to be able to go in and establish rescue works. Any other questions? No, we haven't lost any, thank God. So a lot of the training that we go through is it's so good. In most of the countries that we work in, almost all the brothels are what's called, I would call it like a mom and pop circumstance, and they're not interconnected. It's they're self-run. And so if a kid disappears from here, then in their mind, they're just going to go get another kid and bring them back. And so our goal is obviously to work with law enforcement to see these places shut down, but in many countries, it's very, very difficult. Like I said, in some of the countries, we're able to work with law enforcement to do raids. So like if you go into a place and you find out there's 8, 10 kids, and the country, like the Philippines, the Dominican Republic, we do lots of stuff with them because most of those brothels are run by mafia. And so they're all interconnected, and so you can't just walk in and get kids out. You've got to really strategically plot and plan, whereas in the majority of the other countries, they're not interconnected, and you could build a relationship. The director of Destiny Rescue, he went into the same brothel 3 separate times over a period of a number of weeks, rescued one kid, came back in and asked for that kid, and the brothel owner says, well, that kid's not here. And he's like, well, do you have another kid like that? And she's like, yeah. Brings that kid. He ends up rescuing that kid out of it, comes back again and asks for a third kid, gets that kid out, and then he comes back for the 4th. And the lady's like, I don't know what it is with you. You're bad luck, because every kid that you spend time with ends up disappearing and not coming back. And so she was completely clueless as to what was actually transpiring under there. And so we believe that the Lord can give us grace and wisdom and supernatural insight to be able to go into these places and get kids out and stay as safe as possible. Is Destiny Rescue doing anything locally here in our community? Our primary thing is awareness in the United States of America. As I said, that in America, there are so many organizations that are doing things here, whereas in these other countries where we're currently working, there's very little being done. So we believe our call is to bring awareness, help people know, and then send people like my wife and I to other countries where there's tremendous need. She asked, do we find that a lot of the coercion is drug addiction? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. As I mentioned earlier, people treat their property differently. And so most kids and people, if they're drugged out and all of this other stuff, a customer is not going to want to go to this person who's all, laced out on drugs. And so they try to keep them as healthy and as strong as possible. And so the concept of, we're just drugging these people all up and making them addicts, I believe that's a misconception as well. The goal is to keep people as healthy as possible, especially in the streets of New York, South Bend, Chicago. You would think that they're all addicts, but it's not. Because again, to them, it's money. I buy you and you're my property, and I've got to sell you, and you've always got to be ready to be sold in that way. So but there are people that do, get them addicted and that sort of thing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pastor Mark.